What if the darkest moment of someone's life became the exact place where the power of God suddenly appeared? What if Jesus cares deeply not only about eternal salvation, but also about human sorrow, grief, and heartbreak? And what if one encounter with Christ can completely reverse a situation that looked absolutely hopeless? The small town of Nain was quiet that day, but grief filled the streets. A funeral procession slowly moved through the town gates. People walked together in mourning, their faces heavy with sadness. Tears flowed openly, voices trembled with sorrow. The atmosphere carried the unbearable weight of death. At the center of the crowd was a widow, and beside her was the body of her only son. To modern readers, it may be difficult to fully understand the depth of this tragedy. In ancient times, widows were among the most vulnerable people in society. Without a husband or son, survival itself became uncertain. There were no government programs, no financial safety nets, and very little protection for someone left completely alone. This woman had already buried her husband. Now she was burying her only child. The grief was not only emotional, it was personal, financial, social, and deeply spiritual. Everything she depended on had disappeared. The future looked empty, and perhaps worst of all, nothing could stop the funeral procession now. Death seemed final, hopeless, unchangeable. Many people know what it feels like to walk through moments like that emotionally. Maybe not the exact same situation, but seasons where hope feels buried, times when the future suddenly collapses, moments where loss enters life unexpectedly and changes everything. Some mourn the death of loved ones, others mourn broken dreams, broken relationships, lost purpose, lost peace, lost hope. And in those moments, life can begin to feel like a funeral procession moving slowly forward with no way to stop it. But then Jesus arrived. Luke says that as Jesus approached the town gate, he saw the widow. That detail matters deeply. Jesus noticed her in the middle of the crowd, in the middle of grief, in the middle of overwhelming pain. He saw her. Sometimes people feel invisible in suffering. Grief can become isolating. Pain often creates loneliness because others cannot fully understand what someone is carrying internally. People may continue moving forward with daily life while someone else feels like their world has stopped completely. But Jesus sees sorrow others overlook. He notices tears people try to hide. He sees silent heartbreak. And when Jesus saw the widow, something powerful happened. Luke says his heart went out to her. Other translations say he was moved with compassion. This reveals something beautiful about the heart of Christ. Jesus was not emotionally distant from human suffering. He did not stand coldly observing pain from far away. He cared deeply. The creator of the universe looked at one grieving widow in a small forgotten town and felt compassion. That truth still matters today. God is not indifferent toward pain. Some people secretly believe God only cares about rules, judgment, or religion. Others wonder whether he notices personal suffering at all. But Jesus consistently revealed the compassion of God through his actions. He touched lepers others rejected. He healed the sick. He comforted the brokenhearted. And here he stepped directly into a funeral procession. Then Jesus said something almost unbelievable. "Do not cry." At first, those words sound impossible. How could someone tell a grieving mother not to cry while she walked beside the body of her dead son? But Jesus spoke differently than ordinary people because he carried authority ordinary people did not possess. The crowd likely assumed he was simply offering comfort. They had no idea what was about to happen. Jesus walked toward the coffin, and then something shocking happened. He touched it. That action alone would have startled everyone nearby. According to Jewish law, touching a coffin or dead body created ceremonial uncleanness. Most religious teachers avoided contact with death carefully, but Jesus was never afraid of what human beings feared most. He touched the coffin, and suddenly the procession stopped. Imagine the silence, the crowd watching nervously, the grieving mother frozen in confusion, the pallbearer standing still. Then Jesus spoke directly to death itself. "Young man, I say to you, get up!" And immediately, everything changed. Luke says the dead man sat up and began to speak. Can you imagine the shock? One moment there was mourning. The next moment there was life. One moment hopelessness filled the streets. The next moment fear and amazement spread through the crowd. Death had been interrupted by the authority of Christ. And then comes one of the most beautiful details in the story. Jesus gave him back to his mother. That simple sentence reveals incredible tenderness. Jesus did not perform miracles merely to display power. He restored people. He cared about relationships. He understood the depth of the widow's pain and personally returned her son to her arms. The funeral procession transformed into a celebration of life. Everything changed because Jesus entered the situation. This story reveals profound truths about the character and authority of Christ. First, it reveals that Jesus has authority even over death. Throughout human history, death has remained humanity's greatest enemy. Wealth cannot stop it. Power cannot control it. Intelligence cannot overcome it. Every human being eventually confronts mortality. But Jesus spoke to death like a master commanding a servant, and death obeyed. That authority pointed towards something far greater still to come. One day, Jesus himself would die and rise again, proving permanently that death does not have final authority over those who belong to him. This miracle in Nain became a glimpse of resurrection power, a preview of the hope Jesus would offer the entire world. Second, this story reveals the compassion of Christ. Notice something important. The widow never even asked Jesus for help. Unlike many other miracles, there is no recorded request here, no desperate prayer, no public cry for healing. Jesus acted because he saw suffering and responded with compassion. That matters because there are moments when grief becomes so overwhelming people barely know how to pray anymore. Some people become emotionally exhausted, spiritually numb, too broken even to form words. Yet Christ still sees, still cares, still moves towards suffering people with compassion. This story also reveals that Jesus often works in situations that appear completely hopeless. The son was not sick, he was dead. The funeral had already begun. From a human perspective, the situation was finished. But hopelessness to humans does not limit God. Many people today carry situations they believe are beyond restoration. A broken marriage, a destroyed relationship, an addiction, deep depression, years of regret, spiritual emptiness, dreams that seem buried forever. But the story of Nain reminds believers that Jesus specializes in stepping into impossible situations. Sometimes God brings restoration in ways people never imagined possible. Another powerful truth appears in the contrast between two crowds. One crowd followed Jesus into town, another crowd followed death out of town. Then the two processions collided. Life met death, hope met despair, and Jesus changed the direction entirely. That image feels deeply symbolic. Humanity naturally walks toward death spiritually. Brokenness, sin, and suffering affect every life. But Jesus entered the world bringing life where death had ruled. The gospel itself is the story of life confronting death and life winning. This miracle also revealed something about the identity of Jesus. After witnessing what happened, the people were filled with awe. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." They recognized that something supernatural had occurred, but even they still did not fully understand who stood before them. Jesus was not merely another prophet. He was God in human flesh, the one who created life itself. That is why death obeyed him. And that truth still changes everything today. Because if Jesus truly conquered death, then fear no longer has ultimate control. For believers, death becomes a doorway rather than the end. That hope transforms how people live. It gives strength during grief, peace during uncertainty, confidence during suffering. This does not mean Christians never mourn. Even Jesus himself wept at the tomb of Lazarus later in the Gospels. Grief is real because love is real. But Christian hope declares that death does not ultimately win. Resurrection remains possible because Christ conquered the grave. The widow of Nain likely woke up that morning expecting the worst day of her life. She probably believed the future held only emptiness now. But everything changed because Jesus entered the scene. Many people today feel trapped inside emotional funeral processions of their own. Some carry grief from years ago that still feels heavy. Others carry shame, regret, loneliness, or fear. Some feel spiritually dead inside, disconnected from purpose, peace, or hope. Yet this story reminds people that Jesus still brings life into dead places, sometimes not instantly, sometimes not in the exact way expected. But his power still restores, his compassion still heals, and his presence still changes lives. There is another deeply personal truth hidden in this miracle. Jesus stopped for one grieving person in a small town most people would overlook. That matters because people often assume God only notices the powerful, successful, or influential. But throughout the Gospels, Jesus repeatedly focused attention on ordinary hurting individuals: a widow, a blind beggar, a sick outcast, a grieving parent. The forgotten became deeply important to him. That reveals the heart of God. No pain is too small for him to notice. No person becomes invisible to Christ. No tear goes unseen. The world often values people based on success, beauty, influence, or achievement. But Jesus consistently valued human souls with compassion regardless of social status. The widow of Nain had no power to offer him, no wealth, no influence. Yet Jesus stopped for her anyway, because love moved him. This miracle also reminds believers that timing matters. Jesus arrived at exactly the right moment. Not earlier, not later. Right at the town gate as the funeral procession moved forward. That timing may not have made sense initially, but it revealed God's perfect awareness. Many people struggle with God's timing today. They wonder why prayers seem delayed, why healing has not yet come, why suffering continues longer than expected. But the story of Nain reminds people that God sees the full picture humans cannot see. His timing may feel mysterious, but he remains present even when circumstances seem darkest. The emotional power of this story becomes even greater when imagining the mother's perspective. Moments earlier, she believed she had lost everything. Then suddenly she heard her son speaking again. The impossible happened. Can you imagine her tears then? Not tears of grief, but tears of overwhelming joy. This reflects the deeper hope of the gospel itself. One day, God promises ultimate restoration. One day, sorrow will end. One day, death itself will be destroyed permanently. One day, brokenness will give way to eternal life. The miracle at Nain points forward toward that future hope. Because Jesus did not merely come to improve earthly life temporarily, he came to defeat sin and death completely. The crowd reacted with fear and praise because they recognized they had witnessed divine power. News spread rapidly throughout the region. People began realizing that Jesus was unlike anyone they had ever encountered, and the same realization confronts people today. Who is Jesus truly? A wise teacher? A moral example? Or the Son of God with authority over life and death itself? The answer changes everything. If he truly conquered death, then his promises about eternity matter completely. If he truly possesses resurrection power, then no situation is beyond hope. And if his compassion moved him towards suffering people, then it still moves him today. This story invites every listener to trust him more deeply, not only during joyful seasons, but during grief, loss, fear, confusion, and heartbreak, because Christ remains present, even at the gates of sorrow. Sometimes people assume faith means never struggling emotionally, but the widow of Nain reminds believers that grief and faith can exist together. Pain does not mean God has abandoned someone. Tears do not cancel faith, and sorrow does not remove God's compassion. Jesus entered directly into human suffering because he understood the depth of human pain, and ultimately he would suffer himself at the cross, rejected, mocked, crucified. Yet through his own death and resurrection, he opened the way for eternal life. That is why the miracle at Nain matters so deeply. It points beyond one resurrected son toward the greater hope offered through Christ himself. Hope stronger than death, hope stronger than grief, hope stronger than fear. Today, some people listening may feel emotionally exhausted, spiritually numb, buried under pain. The story of Nain reminds them that Jesus still sees them, still cares, still possesses power over impossible situations, and still brings life where hope seems gone. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin when all human hope disappears. Because then people discover that God's power was never limited by human impossibility. The widow thought the story was over. Jesus revealed it was not. And perhaps someone listening today needs that reminder too. What feels final to you may not be final to God. Thank you for watching this video. If this message encouraged your faith and gave you hope, please like this video, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, and subscribe to Holy Path Insights for more biblical teachings that strengthen hearts and deepen faith in God. May the Lord fill your life with his peace,